Good evening, everybody. This is Russ Petry. I'm the Director of Finance for the City of Raytown, and I'm glad you could join us tonight. I'm seeing that we have one person in the audience today. Just want to remind you that we cannot hear you since it's set up as a webinar, but there is a Q&A button that you can feel free to send questions in to us, and we'll be glad to answer those at the end of the presentation. This presentation is intended to give an overview of the city's funds, how they work, and also how the budget process works for the city. If you're interested in seeing what is being considered for the budget this year, the committee of the whole meeting is going to be on Tuesday at 6 p.m. And there is also a Board of Aldermen meetings in September that will be considering the budget as a whole. So please view the agendas, and if you want to be there and see what happens, you're certainly welcome to attend. So with that, I'll go ahead and get started with the presentation. The City of Raytown's fiscal year. I'll explain a fiscal year in case that's an unfamiliar term to anybody. Fiscal year is basically the business year of the city. So it is different than a calendar year. It runs from November 1 to the following October 31 each year. And each year, all the transactions and accruals are made. We hire an outside CPA firm that does the annual financial audit to ensure that we comply to generally accepted accounting practices, which is called GAAP, as well as compliance for the specific purpose of each fund. The City of Raytown is a fourth-class city by state designation. You may have heard that some cities in Missouri are charter cities, such as Kansas City, St. Louis, and Springfield. And there are also several smaller towns. I believe there are 8 of them left that have charters left from the 1800s. It is a classification done by the state, which means that the city government is elected by a mayor and board of aldermen in the case of the City of Raytown. On property tax, the City of Raytown is still operating on a 1978 property tax levy. That means the city has not passed a property tax increase since 1978. Now, you may notice each year that the levy changes a little bit, and that is because of the Hancock Amendment that is with Missouri, and it is required to change because we cannot change by law. We cannot charge any more percentage of an average income of Missourians than what was in place in 1981. So that is the Hancock Amendment, and that is the reason that the levy changes a small amount each year because the assessments go up and down. The real estate levy for 2019 is 0.4630, which is 5.08% of the total property tax charged to the city property owners in Raytown. Now, 0.4630 is a mill levy, which means that is assessed on each $100 of the assessed value that the county puts on a property. So if you ever look at your assessed value that comes from the county assessor each year, you'll notice that there's a real property value and there's an assessed property value. The assessed property value, if you divide that by 100 and multiply that times our mill levy, you would get approximately what Raytown's portion of the property tax is on that individual property. And here we can see a pie chart, and this is a breakdown of the entire property tax that Raytown property owners pay every year. And you can see on the top of that pie, there is a small slice called city, and that is the size of the city's portion of the property tax bill that each property tax owner pays every year. You can see there are some larger amounts like the school district, and there are some smaller amounts such as the library and the mental health levy. These are all jurisdictions within the county. and specific to Raytown. The City of Raytown has many separate funds, and we call this in the accounting world fund accounting. And in the city government, these funds cannot be intermingled. So in other words, you can't take money from the general fund and spend it on park fund revenues without a board action. Also, you cannot take money from the TIF fund and spend it on capital expenses, because that is a specific fund designed specifically for the TIF expenses. So I'll go through each one of these funds and explain what they are. The general fund is where most of the general expenses of the city come out of. The majority of the payroll comes out of general fund. Also, many of the departments such as administration, finance, community development, public works, all of those come out, and also municipal court. All of those in the police department, they all come out of general fund. The Parks and Recreation Fund is specifically for the Parks and Recreation Department. And that is where they receive all the revenue for the Parks and Recreation Department, as well as they accrue all of the expenses in that fund. The TIF fund we covered a little bit earlier. That is for the TIF district that is in the city of Raytown. It's up on the corner, it starts on the corner of Raytown Road and 350 Highway going east. In that specific area, raises sales tax specific to the TIF fund. It also raises what's called an economic assessment tax. That's called an EATS, and that is also raised through that TIF fund. And those go to pay the bonds that were put in place for the TIF. The capital fund is where all the capital expenses that are not paid out of specific taxes. So if we have capital expenditures, that's where they are paid out of. The sewer fund is also called an enterprise fund within the city, and it collects all the sewer fees that are charged to the sewer customers. It also pays all of the sewer treatment for the city and all the maintenance and upkeep of the sewer system. The capital sales tax fund is a sales tax that is put in place whenever you shop in Raytown. That's part of the sales tax that is charged, and that goes towards capital purchases of the city. It can be equipment or capital expenditures that improve the roads, streets, stormwater. It can be pretty much any capital improvement or equipment. The stormwater fund is a fund that is set aside for stormwater mitigation. So if you see any of the gutters and the big retaining pools at any of the big developments, those are all, the drainage for all of those are handled through all the stormwater fund. And that is where the maintenance and the capital improvements come from. Public Safety Sales Tax Fund is exactly what it says. It is a sales tax that was implemented to cover public safety items. The majority of those come from the police department, but they can include specific items that come from community development or public works that pertain directly to public safety of the residents of Raytown. So that gives you a basic overview of the city's funds, and we'll go over the basics of the general budget next. The budget presentation begins with the Finance Department in May every year. The Finance Department handles the beginning of the budget and all of the processes through the budget, and they also complete the final budget document. And so it all starts and ends in the Finance Department, but there are a lot of other departments that have parts in this. So it's not just the Finance Department. Each department submits what is needed in their own department in personnel, supplies, and other necessary items to function in that department. Reviews are done with each department, so there's a clear understanding of what is being requested within that department. Revenues for each fund is determined by statistical data, economic indicators, and historical information, and also information pertaining to each individual fund. So for instance, sales taxes, we basically budget those based on historical data and what we know the economy is planning to do according to a lead economist. Things like property tax, those are set by a mill levy that is done every year. And so we basically know what is available from the county through the property taxes. So that is a pretty solid number. There are many other items that are budgeted within the revenue, such as city fees, city revenues through the sewer department. All of those are based on historical data, what we know is going on with those individual departments, and also the individual rates. The budgets are reviewed by a committee of the whole of the Board of Aldermen, and that is the committee that I mentioned earlier that is happening on Tuesday at 6 p.m. The committee of the whole meets, and they hear the detail of the budget that is being requested from each department, so that they have a clear understanding of what is in each department. So when the final budget is presented to them in a regular Board of Aldermen meeting, they have a full understanding of what is being presented. The budget is presented to the full Board of Aldermen. This year it will be in September, and it possibly may go over into October, but it has to be approved by October 31st. So that is the timeline of the budget and basically the basics of the general budget operations. The preparation of the budget takes a lot of work from all of the departments. As I said, the revenues are determined by statistical data, economical indicators, and the city growth. Revenues and expenses for enterprise funds, such as sewer fund, are based on real and anticipated cost trends. We look at all of those rates based on what it costs to process the sewer, and also what we know are the rates charged to the customers for the revenue. They are determined on each fund so that each fund remains solvent and stable. We are required by the state to present a balanced budget every year. That is in the Missouri state statutes. Expenses are calculated on each department based on real historic data, anticipated projects and improvements, and also existing contracts. All of those are taken into consideration. The finance department compiles all the data into a budget document for approval. And once the Board of Aldermen has approved the annual budget, then the budget documents are processed and they're available on the website and also in printed form. And that is done with the help of the administration department. A report is done in the annual financial audit that compares budget expenses and revenue to actual expenditures and revenue. So that is posted on the finance department in the website for the City of Raytown. You can look at that and see how the city did according to the budget of the previous year. The budget is also located always in the City of Raytown. It's at www.raytown.mo.us, and it's on the Finance Department webpage. And that is posted as soon as the Board of Aldermen has approved it, and it is ready for publication. The staff takes a lot of time to ensure the accuracy of the budget with the best knowledge and forecasting that is available. There is a lot of work and a lot of pride that goes into this document. And so when you see this document, you know that approximately 6 to 7 months of work went into that document to produce it. So there's a lot of detail there. And that is the end of the presentation. It's a short one, but hopefully it gave you a better overview of what happens with the budget. And if you have any questions, feel free to hit the Q&A tab and enter those questions, and we'll be glad to answer them. If you have any later, you're welcome to contact the city, and we'll be glad to answer those for you.
We did, hello, Damon Hodges, City Administrator. We did want to also point out that on several of our funds, one that was there as well as transportation, capital improvements, and our public safety. Those are also approved through our sales tax oversight committee. So they have another layer of approval process, and that the committee is made up of your citizens appointed by the mayor and the board. So several of your funds not only are seen by us as staff, but as well as our board, as well as citizens before you make any purchases with those amounts.
Okay, at this point, I'm not seeing any questions. Oh, there is one that just popped up. The question is, if everyone cannot see it, it's how much of the gasoline purchased by non-Raytown residents gets charged to sales tax? And is it the same as if a traveler stopped at a restaurant or fast food or other shop? It's interesting, gasoline sales tax is a little bit different than the sales tax. It's a little bit of a different rate. And it is the same for a non-Raytown resident as it is for a Raytown resident. If it is purchased within the city of Raytown, it comes to the city, and it is accepted through the state. The state handles that fund, and they transfer it down to the city of Raytown. So your question is, if a traveler stopped at a restaurant or fast food or other stop, restaurants are charged a little bit different rate because of it's a different type of sales tax. And that is basically because of differences with the county and state rates on those. We have another question. Does the city manager approve all departments' budgets prior to going to the Board of Aldermen? I can guarantee you that he does. He is involved with all of the department meetings that we have when we go over their individual budgets. Those individual meetings are comprised of the city administrator, the assistant city administrator, myself, the finance director, and also our controller from the finance department. And we all ask questions that we have of the department so that we have a clear understanding of what's going into that budget. And we also provide assistance to those department heads if they have any questions of us of how things need to be listed in the budget so that it's clear to everyone when it's published. So to answer your question, yes, there are several layers to that, but the city administrator does have an approval process in all the department budgets. These are great questions. I'm looking forward to any more that you have. Okay, here's one. There's an indication that property taxes have not been increased for many years, but have the increase due to increased assessments? The answer is yes. The levy increases slightly each year when the assessments go up or down. The levy can go up or down accordingly, and that is because of the Hancock Amendment that is in place in Missouri. The Hancock Amendment states that we cannot charge, and this is any jurisdiction in the state of Missouri, with a certain exceptions. For instance, a school district is not included in that, I don't believe. But the Hancock Amendment states that we cannot charge any more percentage to the average Missouri income than what was charged in 1981 when the Hancock Amendment was first implemented. So there is a formulation that is done every year based on the assessments from the county, and that formulation allows for a slight a slight inflation increase, which I believe is 1.6%, if I remember right. And also, it can go up based on the assessments. But basically, the city has not ever passed an increase since 1978. And I hope that answers your question a little bit. There's also another question here that said, are city revenues significantly impacted by COVID pandemic during 2020? If so, what does this mean for city services? I can give you a little bit of insight on that. Some things have been impacted by COVID and some things have not so far. The things that have remained steady is sales tax. I can tell you that the sales tax revenue has remained fairly steady within the city of Raytown, not so much in other cities. The reason for that is because our major retailers in Raytown are considered essential businesses and have stayed open during the pandemic. And they have also had very good sales during this period. So sales taxes are fairly steady. Property taxes are set by a levy and they're done by an assessment, so those are not affected so much. The things that are affected are some of the city service fees, some of the municipal court fees, and those are basically because if you remember when the county had a closed down, some of those services were impacted a little bit because they weren't done for a certain period of time. The city is back open and we are collecting those fees again. The court is open, they are collecting their fees. And I expect that there will be some impact, but it won't be a huge major one. The major income for the city is sales tax and property tax, and also franchise fees, which are charged by the utilities. So those things have really not been impacted severely. The next question is, do we have an indication yet whether our sales tax revenues are up or down? Since many people are home and not traveling. To kind of dovetail on the last comment, sales taxes have been up since the pandemic started. I attribute this to some of it as pandemic spending is what I called it. People were panic shopping for a while. Yeah. As we saw, most of the retailers were out of toilet paper for a while, and now they're all out of hand sanitizer and Clorox wipes. So people have been buying things a little bit more than they should sometimes, but the sales have been steady. So those sales tax revenues have been steady. The thing that will be interesting to watch is what happens during the Christmas season. I'm not expecting a huge impact, but I don't have a crystal ball either. So it will remain to be seen. What happens with the pandemic. Whether there are any more orders done by the county or the state, don't know that yet. But we'll watch with a close eye and keep an eye on those things. Next question is, will the budget format remain the same for some time period? It has changed periodically over the years, which makes it difficult for regular people to be able to make good comparisons. It would be nice if the audit format matched the budget format. Well, I can answer that the budget format is not changing this year. It's going to be in the same basic format that it has been in the last few years. So hopefully it will be an easy comparison for you. The audit is actually done by an outside CPA firm and is done in conformance with the GAAP, General Accepted Accounting Practices. And so there are certain statements within the annual financial audit that are required that are totally different than what the budget document is. So while we try to keep those as close as possible so you can make some comparisons, there will always be some different from the budget to the financial audit. And the next question, are the funds from the safety tax that previously went to EMS now going to the police department? And The answer is those funds for the public safety sales tax is what I believe that you're referring to. Did go to cover some payroll expenses for the police department as well as the EMS. As you know, the EMS services were transferred to the fire district last year. And so there are some funds available within the public safety sales tax that we are trying to earmark for some public safety improvements and purchases. And that will all go through the Sales Tax Oversight Committee, as Damon mentioned earlier, and also through the Board of Aldermen, so those can be expended. The next question, how much is being budgeted for road construction? And I will let Mr. Hodges answer that question because he has a more in-depth handle on that side of the budget.
Well, you're taking away our thunder for our budget presentation. So we'll have to wait. And our Public Works Director will be presenting this coming Tuesday at the meeting. So please tune in. He'll explain more about what his budget is regarding transportation, upcoming roadway and construction projects. We deem them as major capital projects. Right now we have the 350 highway that's will be underway this coming fall. And I was stated during that meeting before the board approval that kind of took quite a bit of the funding this past year, but he has other projects he's got potentially coming up for this coming year. So he'll explain those more this coming Tuesday when Public Works does their presentation, Jose Leon, and give you a lot more feedback regarding that one. I just want to say too that this is our second year of providing this. One of the things that since I've been aboard as a city administrator, and then eventually we hired our current finance director, Russ Petry here. He decided that it would be good to inform the public, to give them more information about where our funds go, things of that sort. So we're glad to have this type of participation and questions. And I think it's helping to get the word out of how we're spending the funds and let people know what to look for.
There is one other question. The police department budget increase or decrease this year? And the best answer for that is we are in the process of going through that right now. It has yet to be presented to the Board of Aldermen or the committee yet. And so we will have more information on that in the coming meetings. There is a committee of the whole meeting this next Tuesday at 6 p.m. And also the budget will be presented as a whole in September. So you're welcome to attend either one of those meetings and or view them online. I believe they're both streamed. And you can view and see what is being presented at that time. But right now it is still being compilated and put together. So it's really hard for me to answer that one at this moment.
All right.
Okay, I'm not seeing any other questions. So thank you everyone for your attendance. I hope you got something out of this. And if you have any questions later on or any suggestions on how to make this better, I'm all ears. So please let us know and we'll look forward to hearing from you. And thank you so much for participating tonight. Hope you have a great evening.